Friday, September 13th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I want to talk about currency manipulation today. Nowadays, you could call it precious metals manipulation or fiat money manipulation. And I want to reference a book about 15th century Renaissance Florence called Medici Money, Banking, Metaphysics, and Art in 15th Century Florence by Tim Parks. Before I go on to the book, just want to talk a little bit about what goes on nowadays and why I think the powers that be do manipulate currencies, not only the prices, but also education, propaganda about money, about different views about money, economics. Some of you might remember Congressman Ron Paul asking Ben Bernanke, of course, what gold was a few years ago in Congress. Ben Bernanke said it was tradition, right? And gold proponents, sound money proponents, are fringe people like me, right? It's alternative. We're called gold bugs. We're called people who have fetish for gold, right? That's how they do it, the propaganda. How can I say the propaganda part of it? They don't teach about money at school or university. They don't go through the origins of money. They don't explain how the monetary system works. It's all very superficial. Of course, unless you go to study at the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama, or if you study on your own, right? Nowadays, if you shouldn't expect to learn about these things at a major university anywhere in the world, or any school either. So that's how they manipulate people's perception. People think that what we have now, fiat currency, is money. And why do I think they do that? Well, because the bankers don't like competition. I think they also use democracy, much like they use the church and religion back in Renaissance Italy, to control people, to give them a reason why they should tax them, to never allow people to better themselves. It's all part of the game. So through democracy and the church and religion in Renaissance Italy and democracy nowadays, the powers that be find excuses to tax people, to keep people under their control. And of course, the very wealthy, the bankers and the 1%, they know how to avoid the rules that applies to everyone else. That's why the central bankers, the BIS, the very wealthy, that's why they keep precious metals. But for the general public is not taught about precious metals. Like, for example, in the UK, they never talk about the fact that the gold sovereign is legal tender and that there's no capital gains tax on it. That's kept very hush-hush. I bet you if you asked a financial advisor, he wouldn't know, and he wouldn't advise you to buy gold anyway. So that's how they do it. The other way, of course, is to look at gold as a commodity, as risky. And that's probably why we see a lot of volatility in the fiat price of gold, to keep people away from it. They encourage people to trade it instead of owning it physically as well. So there are all these things that, how can I say, help the powers that be stay up and keep the general public under their control, and keep the general public, of course, indebted, because the general public doesn't realize that saving in the fiat currency that they're forced to use, the paper money that they're forced to use, over the decades, it only robs them of their, how can I say, of the wealth that they've been able to store through hard work and dedication, right? So that's the name of the game, and that's why most recently, Chairman Jay Powell of the Fed, was asked by a congresswoman about gold. And he basically said, no, we can't go back to gold. It's no good, right? So now to the book, the Medici Money book. So let's see how back in Renaissance Italy, how the manipulation was done. It was slightly different, but very similar. Just different methods, and of course, a different time and different technology. So I'll go to page 32, which is in chapter 2, about the art of exchange, which was the Money Changers Guild in Florence. So they're talking about currency here now. The purpose of any currency, you would have thought, is to offer a unit of wealth that, when multiplied or divided, will buy anything for sale within a given geographical area. This is at once the wonder and danger of money, that in different amounts it can be made equivalent to almost anything. Hence, we have copper coins that can be added up to make silver coins, silver that can be added up to make gold, or in our day, the banknote, $1, 5, 10, 20, 100. He goes on, not so in 15th century Florence. Your silver coin, the picciolo, could not be added up to make a golden florin. The florin, by the way, is about 3.45 grams of gold content. So it's slightly less than half a gold sovereign. They were separate currencies. The logic of this was that since the two coins were actually made of precious metals, indeed their worth depended on the intrinsic value of each mineral. The relationship between them could no more be fixed than the relationship between apples and oranges. Makes sense so far, right? Piccioli could only be changed into florins by the bank at the going rate for changing silver into gold. Thus the reasoning. The reality was that into the very element that potentially frees us from class, the element that allows the hateful parvenu to pile up wealth and act as if his peasant family were as noble as mine, a radical divide was established. The picciolo was the currency of the poor. Think of fiat currency, right? The salary of the worker, the price of a piece of bread. Luxury goods, wholesaling, international trade, these were the exclusive realm of the golden florin. By law, it was a situation not unlike that in the communist bloc some years ago, where the rich and powerful used the dollar and the masses the zloty or ruble. And I would argue even nowadays that's what's going on. The rich and powerful are able to get out of paper currencies. They're able to do it because they earn more of that paper currency. They put it into precious metals. They put it into other hard assets, into land, into property, right? It wasn't just in communist Eastern Europe. Men who dealt in piccioli had a long way to go. Across the banker's green table, you could make the move from one world to another, from silver to gold, modesty to riches, at the price of a small commission. Needless to say, the poor man's money tended to be worth less and less. In 1252, when the florin was first minted, it could be bought with a lira of piccioli, which is to say 20 piccioli. Around 1500, you needed 7 lira of piccioli, or 140 piccioli. This was partly because the merchant who belonged to the Art di Calimala, the Merchants Guild, the silk manufacturer who belonged to the Arte di Por San Maria, the Clothmakers Guild, earned in florins but paid salaries in piccoli. When profits were down, they encouraged the mint, which was controlled by the government, which in turn was formed mainly of men from these powerful guilds, the bankers, the 1%, to reduce the silver content in the piccoli. So there you go, the manipulation, right? Reducing the silver content in the piccoli. That way it would take fewer florins to pay the same salaries in piccoli to the unsuspecting poor. Archbishop Antonio condemned this practice. The archbishop was well loved for his constant work to improve the lot of the poor. He even went around personally to put bread in the hands of dying plague victims. But nobody was ever excommunicated for fiddling the currency, as they were when a debt to the Pope wasn't paid. Nor was anyone publicly whipped or put in the stocks, as when a silk worker stole some of the material she was weaving. So there you go. Same thing's happening today. They're debasing the fiat currency, and it's not even silver nowadays. It's just paper, right? At least back then they had the piccoli, which were silver coins. Still, they manipulated that. They debased that. And the people who did that never got into trouble, a bit like today. Of course, some traders get into trouble nowadays for spoofing gold and silver, but people like the central banks, the BIS or the IMF, they're above the law. We've seen people like Bill Murphy from GATA trying to expose these people, taking them to court, but the Federal Reserve, or auditing the Federal Reserve, and nothing's ever done, right? How many people were punished after the collapse of '08? How many bankers went to jail, right? So it's the same rules. The powerful people, they can break the law and do whatever it takes to manipulate the markets and currencies. And the poor people suffer, and when they do something wrong, they're punished, right? So nothing really changes. So I thought it was really interesting to see that they were doing it back then in Renaissance Italy in the 1400s, and they're doing it today. So how do we protect ourselves today? Well, we continue to try to accumulate physical precious metals, gold and silver, if we can, if we're able to save enough piccoli or paper money to do so. With the Glint card, of which I have a promo code, Mario Glint 79. What does the Glint card do? Well, it allows you to buy as little as £1 or $1 of gold, which is less than a gram of gold, and that gold will be stored physically in your name, allocated account in Switzerland, and at the same time you'll get a MasterCard or debit card, which allows you to spend that gold. So back in 15th century or Renaissance Florence, the florin, which was the gold coin, was 3.5 grams, which was too valuable for most people. So that was the other way that they kept people from accumulating gold, and you couldn't break it up, right? So you had to accumulate a lot of fiat money to get that gold coin. So nowadays with Glint, you're able to do it for as little as $1 or £1. There's links below in the description for the Glint app. There's also my promo code for gold investments. If you want to, instead of buying gold through Glint, buy it physically directly from a bullion dealer, gold investments, the promo code is maneco 64. You get 0.5% discount from gold investments. Arguably one of the oldest bullion dealers in the city of London, and it's family run. So there you go. History doesn't repeat exactly, but human nature never changes, and things always come back and manipulation of currencies is been around for probably millennia, not just hundreds of years. And it's basically a way for the powers that be, the 1%, the elite, to keep their power of the public, to keep the public under their thumb. So if you want to make sure you're not one of those, think about precious metals. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and on DTube. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.